Unique people leading unique lives shape and inform Iowa City. This community is enhanced by these women and men who live in our midst, working, teaching, creating. Welcome to a series of conversations with people who have stories to tell. Join my guests and me, Ellen Buchanan, in a series of interviews called One of a Kind. Ed Zastrow is a well-known and well-respected member of our community. For 18 years, he and his wife Sherry owned and operated Bushnells Turtle, a favorite restaurant to many. Bushnells was housed in a historic preservation building in downtown Iowa City on the pedestrian mall. The building was part of urban renewal and opened in August of 1978. Besides business, Ed has involved himself in many areas in our community. For 20 years, he was active with library issues on the local, state, and national levels. Serving as a member and president of the Iowa City Public Library Board of Trustees, he was named by the Iowa Library Association the Outstanding Trustee of the Year, which was quite an honor. Ed was also a member of the State Library Trustee Association. While serving on the Iowa City Library Foundation Board, he and the library director at that time, Lolly Eggers, made the very first call for the foundation. Healthcare issues are important to him. Ed served on the board of the Mental Health Center, Mercy Hospital Board, and was president of the Mercy Hospital Foundation. Ed is currently the executive director of the Ronald McDonald House. Ed's wife, Sherry, his junior high school sweetheart, is the associate director of the United Way of Johnson County. Besides Ed's business and community involvements, he and his wife have been foster parents to several teenagers. They have 3 adult children, Nathan, Adam, and Lucas, and a permanent foster son, Tanvo. Welcome to One of a Kind, Ed.
Thank you, Ellen.
Let's talk about your very early years in Clinton, Iowa, where you were born in 1945, I know. Your father was a musician, I read, by education, and your mother a homemaker. Now, I want to know, did this music, these genes, did they go to you or did they skip a generation?
To my father's great chagrin, they skipped a generation. Despite his best efforts, didn't work for either myself or my brother. He would be very, very proud of his one grandchild, Adam, who definitely picked up his musical interest. Adam is quite a keyboardist, loves it. My dad played a number of instruments. Actually, he would say that about the only thing he didn't master was percussion. Otherwise, he played quite a range.
Was this an avocation or a vocation?
Avocation.
Avocation.
He was trained as a musician in school. That's his degree. He was a first-class musician all through the Navy, which he regarded as a great luxury. And clarinet, saxophone, piano, organ, and violin were his principal instruments. He really enjoyed piano, organ, and violin the most. As well as he was a composer. He composed religious hymns.
What did he do for a living?
He sold furniture. They had a very large furniture store in Clinton, Iowa, Paskey's, and he had it for the duration of his life. The building burned in the late 70s. And that put an end to the business. He did not reopen that. However, he then formally went into the antique business, which he had also had as an avocation throughout his life.
And continued with his music, I'm sure.
Yes, every day.
Every day. Now, growing up, did you have a teacher that meant a lot to you in junior high or high school that influenced you?
I had a 5th grade teacher that was remarkable, Mrs. Oker. We got along famously. She made a big impression on me. In junior high, I had a remarkable speech teacher, Dean Travis. and I got involved in speech a great deal through junior high and high school. And in high school, I had a terrific instructor who probably had the most impact on me of any of my instructors, Dave Kirkman. And Dave Kirkman wound up coming to Iowa City. Dave Kirkman was also very influential in me getting involved in library issues.
What was his field? What did he do?
Dave taught civics and government and enjoyed violating the minor caveats of the Clinton High School. Every time we had a birthday in his class, he would close the door and allow us to celebrate birthday with cake. And this was a taboo.
Was this a big deal?
This was a big deal. This was a taboo at Clinton High. You couldn't do this, and Dave enjoyed this. And as a consequence, his students really enjoyed him. And ultimately, Dave wound up teaching in Iowa City and lives in Iowa City to this day.
Well, you came after Clinton High School. Well, but in junior high, you met your wife. Is it 7th grade you met?
That's right. As I was cleaning spitballs up off the floor. Yes.
There's got to be, but you waited a long time till you got married. It was in college.
Dated steadily throughout high school. And once we got to the University of Iowa, we fought rather steadily through the University of Iowa and ultimately got married. Right as she was graduating. I still had a year left.
Now you were a political science major, and what did you want to do?
I did not have a clue.
Not a clue.
Political science is one of the least valuable degrees one can obtain. However, it did become clear as I was moving toward graduation, and there was a period of a great deal of activism on campuses, and I did want to do something in public service. The more I interviewed with corporations, the less I was inclined toward them, and wound up working for the Centers for Disease Control.
What brought you back to Iowa City?
I think like many folks that have been here, they sort of can't wait to leave by the time they graduate. And a little bit of time out in the real world convinces them that they can't wait to get back. And I enjoyed the work I was doing for the Centers for Disease Control very much, but we were also looking at a family and did not want to be subject to periodic moves and dislocations and moving around the country. And it was really the area that we liked. And so we deliberately sought to get back to Iowa City, as we have heard from so many people that have gone through the exact same route.
So you came back to Iowa City, and a few years after you came back, you got involved in the urban renewal project in Bushnells Turtle.
When we came back to Iowa City, I was with the Iowa Regional Medical Program, which was part of the College of Medicine, and did that for 3 years. However, when we came back to Iowa City, we very much wanted to have our own business. We had looked at other places too, Colorado and Washington being amongst them, as far as where do we sort of want to set up roots. And
Washington, D.C. or Washington State?
Washington State. And came very close to pursuing some situations there. When we came back to Iowa City, this sounds almost as a hokey story, but a friend of mine, Jim Smith, who I went to school with and who continues to live here and works at the university, the very first day that we were back and looking around said, I have a little restaurant I'd like you to try, and took us to Bushnells Turtle, which at that time was in the Ped Mall, in the forerunner to the Ped Mall in the Temporaries. In front of Things, Things, and Things. And from the moment we walked in, it was like, I would love to have this place, and no idea that that's eventually how it would go.
Why? What spoke to you in the restaurant when you walked in and you said,
The interior decor was very interesting and had a lot of antiques. It obviously had a great deal of personal attention. It was a strong personal statement by the owners. It was very comforting, comfortable place, very welcoming and different. And obviously was the love of those owners' lives.
So what happened? What happened? Because we were in many businesses were in temporaries, and for people who are new to Iowa City, before the Ped Mall, what happened?
In our personal situation, we came to actually, my parents knew the parents of the owners of that particular business, and a situation developed that they were interested in selling. And also that was the point where Iowa City was at the absolute bottom of urban renewal. At that stage, where the old Capitol Center sits right now was nothing but mud. All the buildings had been razed. It was all mud. There was no Plaza Center 1, and they had succeeded in tearing down a lot, but the plans for redevelopment were in disarray, contentious, in court, and I think these folks were not optimistic as for how they would get out of this particular situation, and they had a willing guppy willing to buy this business, and they were happy to sell.
So you bought Bushnells Turtle's name in a temporary. When did you decide to move it into this the structure that we all remember?
Almost before we even had purchased Bushnells, we were interested in the College Block building. The College Block building is essentially a building that is about 3 times the size of the building I was used to as a little boy, in which my father had his furniture store. It was a grand structure. And the College Block building had been condemned. It had been vacant for 8 years, and courtesy of my father, I was used to seeing things that apparently had not much value restored and turned into exquisite pieces, and this was simply a much larger antique than the usual. And we had the opportunity to tour the building with Dick Hansen and a contractor, my attorney, engineers, and at that time when we toured the building, the contractor and the architect said something remarkable is going on here, as we were standing in this dark basement, no electricity in the building, and I had not a clue what they were talking about, and what they were talking about was we had 5 inches of rain last night and this building is dry, which told them that it was well built, exactly.
Built in the, in the late 1800s?
It was built in 1878.
1878.
5 years earlier, incidentally, than the marker that's on the building that says 1883. Subsequent research has shown that it was in 1878, which ironically made it precisely 100 years old at the time we reopened the building.
So when did it get put on the state preservation list or status? When did it receive that?
It was placed on the National Register of Historic Places, I believe in 1981, in 1971, about 8 years before we acquired it. And it was placed on the National Registry of Historic Places by Elizabeth Foxley, who at that time was a staff member for State Division of Historic Preservation in Old Brick. And Elizabeth Foxley went on to become Mrs. Jim Leach, Deba Leach. And she took quite an interest in the project as it was moving along and as we were renovating and restoring the structure.
Do you remember the first day that when you opened?
Perfectly.
Is it just indelibly imprinted? And
Sure.
Must have been so exciting. And this was, you were doing this together, you and Sherry, right?
Correct.
And this was a big, family effort.
Right. We had been in the other location for more than 2 years under our ownership, and it was quite an effort to get the building. It was a competitive bid process through the City of Iowa City and marketing the urban renewal parcels, and this one was unique in that it had a standing building on it. The others were all bare land. And we worked a great deal. Dick Cruz was the architect. He gave us an enormous amount of wonderful suggestions that you see on display in the building. And then all over the building was, all plans were also reviewed by the Department of Interior and Historic Preservation folks in D.C. We were awarded the property by the city in October of 1977 and immediately launched into the project, and we opened on August 15th, 1978, the date we said we would open.
Who picked the menu? Was this menu, did you have it when you were in your temporaries, or was this a new menu when you opened?
In the temporary location, they had the basic sandwiches that we served throughout. They also had a menu of soups, and those were the two items they were famous for.
Soups and sandwiches.
Right, and we expanded those slightly. But we also added salads, and then we added desserts, and the desserts
Carrot cake.
to be, yes, the desserts proved to be very, very successful. And we got into the catering business pretty extensively. Those were all expansions that were able to be done in a larger location that really weren't feasible in a very small location that was in the original temporaries.
How did you all manage with a growing family? You had young boys. Did they help in the store? And you had foster children. Did they help in the business?
It was a deliberate decision because we wanted a situation where we would be able to split the time. I was a house husband half the time, and my wife was at Bushnells half the time. And that was a very deliberate decision in picking a business. We wanted that. And the business afforded that luxury perfectly. And the boys grew up around that business. They all eventually worked there. It was very much a family enterprise. Many of the antiques that wound up inside in the interior decor were items that were located by my father. And ironically, a lot of his friends, because many of them became aware of what we were doing, and they kept their eye out for very nice pieces that might come their way, and we worked them all in.
And what fun for them to be able to come to Iowa City and see the antiques and have a wonderful lunch. What was the best part of running this restaurant? I mean, what was the best part of this kind of business for you?
Always the best were best customers and best employees. We ran a business that was based on very repetitive customer loyalty, hundreds and hundreds of folks that we got used to seeing all the time. Likewise, we enjoyed a remarkable string of success with our employees. We had spectacular employees. We tended to hold them for quite a while. We kept in touch with many, many, many of them. They were just extremely good folks to work with.
Yeah, I heard you were a tough-minded and very fair employer. That's what I heard, and very fair. That's so with reluctance, but perhaps with some celebration, you decided to sell. Correct?
Yes. And my wife was probably a larger driving motivator than I was. I would probably still be standing behind the counter at age 62. The hours were really getting to her. And she bore much more of the catering responsibilities, and it just was not as much fun for her. She is frequently quoted as saying, "We were in the restaurant business 18 years, and I enjoyed 15 of them very much," and she was getting very tired of it by the end. And really, she was the driving force that just said, a year from now, we're not going to be doing this any longer, period. I don't know what we're going to be doing, but we're not going to be doing this. She wanted out.
So you did?
Yes.
Amazing.
And that's very much how we
got
just
out of the business.
determined that we were going to just sell
1
by
year.
a certain period.
So now she's involved with United Way, like I said in my introduction, and you are the executive director of the Ronald McDonald House, which is an amazing institution. What would you like people to know about, perhaps that they don't know about the Ronald McDonald House?
Probably one of the largest lessons is to be thankful for what you take for granted every day, just the simple pleasures and profound award of good health. the house does a remarkable amount of good. It's a very satisfying place to work because we work with individuals that are frequently coping with St. Peter for their child.
Right.
And they cope with this with enormous grace. And the house does a great deal of good for folks throughout the Midwest. It is just a very remarkable, very singular place to work. Brings you a profound amount of joy. It's really been very delightful. It was totally unexpected, and it's a privilege.
And you work with a lot of volunteers. It's a small staff you have, correct?
Very small, just 3 full-time employees and 6 part-time employees, and 50 regularly scheduled volunteers that work at the house, each of them working a 3-hour shift during the week, anywhere from 9 in the morning to 9 at night. We're there every day of the week.
It kind of fits, to me, looking at your story, that you've always been interested in young students and young people. I mean, not only you had children of your own, you had your employees, they became friends of yours, and then you had foster children, and then a permanent foster child. So kind of fits. It's a good fit, I think.
Yes.
Okay, the other part of your story that I, of course, interested in, because I too love libraries, is your passion for 20 years and your interest in libraries, both locally and statewide, and some national things. Where does this come from? Where does this love of libraries come from?
At this point, I probably sound like every keynote speaker at every library convention that I've been to, and we tell all of them, please don't start by telling us how much you love libraries and books, and that's exactly where I'm at. I remember going to the Clinton Public Library. My dad used it a lot. He was at the library a lot. But I remember very early on going, and just how books could take you and transport you away. I read travel books and I read adventure books and a lot of true life adventure books, Mount Everest types and seafaring, true stories as well as fiction, but generally both in those veins. It just made a big impression on me, and I loved the Clinton Library. I really loved it, and I know all of those warm, soft feelings people have for libraries. And my involvement in the library in Iowa City almost was a little bit accidental. We were redeveloping the college block building, which is just a block from this building. And at the time, there was great controversy of what to do with a new library. We were in the former Carnegie Library, and it just simply made common sense to me. You mean we can have this remarkable traffic generator on property in downtown Iowa City that does not really compete with any business here, even bookstores, and we all benefit from it. This seemed a no-brainer. And it was being fought rather strongly by the Chamber of Commerce and by local paper. And I was one of the few businessmen that didn't feel that way. And that is how I came to meet Lolly Eggers. And about a year after the referendum is when I joined the library board.
And did you serve 1 term or 2 terms?
1 term.
1 term.
The Iowa City Public Library in Iowa, library trustees serve 6-year terms, and many of them will wind up being on library boards for a very, very long period of time, which is not something I generally support. I believe you make your contribution and oftentimes move on, and that policy is followed fairly strongly in the case of Iowa City. It's a 6-year term. That's enough time to do something. And in Iowa City, they encourage folks to move on after their term. They don't really strongly encourage
You to rejoin.
Right.
Sign up again.
And the actual application came about through two people, Bob Downer and, again, Dave Kirkman suggested I apply. I wasn't thinking in those terms. And Bob Downer and I ironically disagreed completely on the library at that time. I said, you want me to go on there despite the fact my views don't square with yours? And he said, absolutely. He had no problem with that as long as they were reasoned and thought out. So
that's great. And then you got involved in the State Library Association, and did you not?
Correct, and all of that came really because of Lolly. I enjoyed what we were doing here, but I could see that it, in Iowa City in many ways had the luxury that a lot of other libraries in the state, particularly small libraries, did not enjoy at that time. And just simply became increasingly involved, and I enjoyed it in different facets, whether a regional library trustee or at the state level, or involved at the State Trustees Association or with ALA. It was all really fascinating, and I enjoyed the companionship of the people that I was around and the issues that we were exposed to.
So during all of this, and do you remember the day that we moved into this the new library?
Oh, absolutely.
Wasn't that such an exciting day?
And I
to
remember
see people all ages carrying books across the street.
Remember being here when this was a vacant lot, and we had little chalk lines drawn out trying to show where the children's room would be and where the circulation desk would be, and most people were just giving you blank looks of not really comprehending what was going to go on here. This was also a landmark, absolute trendsetter of a library. This is the first library that was public library in the United States that was fully automated for both bibliographic and circulation purposes. It's taken for granted now, but this was the alpha course. Lolly and her staff were breaking brand new ground when this library was put together.
It's a great institution. I want to, before we end our talk, I want to ask just about your children. Where are they and what are they about?
All of our kids went to Iowa City schools. They all were in the same neighborhood from Hoover, Southeast City High, and Nathan is our eldest son, and Nathan is working for a trade journal. He's a writer and a photographer and lives in Chicago, and is doing well, and a very, very good kid, and he's clearly enjoying Chicago.
Great.
Long-standing relationship with a delightful young lady named Katie Klassman. And Tan Vo, our same age as Nathan, our adult Vietnamese foster son, is a civil engineer, graduated from University of Iowa, had excellent grades, very work-oriented, spectacular kid, lives near San Francisco, just recently relocated there from working in St. Louis. And Adam is slightly younger than Nathan by a little more than a year. And Adam lives in Chicago, and again, has a wonderful girl, Maggie Boyer. And Adam is a woodworker. Adam and Nathan both graduated from Columbia College in Chicago, which is an arts university in downtown Chicago. And Adam enjoys custom, high-end, commission woodworking pieces.
A little bit like his grandfather in the furniture business.
And he's also a musician. And Lucas is our youngest son, and he is a junior at North Central College in Naperville, Illinois. And his primary interest and love is Japanese language, Japanese society, Asian culture in general, and this is his area of interest, is winding up in international studies with a strong interest in the Asian Rim area.
Well, with all of the things you do and have done, do you have any time for any hobbies? Any interests outside of all the work that you've done in the community and in business?
Not a big hobby guy.
You're not a big hobby guy. I know you love to read books.
Yes, fond of saying the greatest luxury is to read uninterrupted. Very much enjoy reading, and that won't end, and that's been lifelong, and I really enjoy reading a great deal and tend to read a fairly wide variety of items, and my wife and I very much support local movies. We have a whole group of couples that we see every Friday and Saturday as we are picking off the latest movies around town.
That's great.
So we get to that, and we do a little bit of travel. We get into Chicago a fair amount, enjoy it.
You were in Japan,
right,
visiting.
and then we usually go and ski in the winter. That is what we enjoy doing.
That sounds great. Well, Ed, it's been just a delight talking to you, and I appreciate you being a guest.
Thank you.
My guest on One of a Kind has been Ed Zastrow, Executive Director of the Ronald McDonald House. For 18 years, he and his wife Sherry owned and operated the very popular Bushnells Turtle restaurant. Ed has been a dedicated volunteer. He has given countless hours to library issues on the local, state, and national levels. He served as the president of the Library Board and the Library Foundation. He was on the Mental Health Center Board, the Mercy Hospital Board, and president of the Mercy Hospital Foundation. As a family, they've been foster parents to many teenagers. Ed contributes much to our community, quietly and without fanfare. He is politically astute and a commentator on local issues. Words used to describe Ed are fair-minded, respected, analytical, private, and an advocate for social justice. Ed Zastrow is one of a kind.